You're listening to the Around the Lens podcast, the home of high-quality, roundtable, visual journalism discussion about the news, topics, and gear related to our career field. Now, here's the host of our show, David J. Murphy.
Yes.
Hello and welcome to Around the Lens, episode 236. I'm your host, David J. Murphy. Joining me this week are my co-hosts, Travis Keys, a freelance photographer based out of New York. Hello, Travis.
I'm not free. I'm so not free. I charge for what I do on it.
A costly lance?
How you doing, brother? How are things in your neck of the woods?
Things are great in my neck of the woods. No problems,
Awesome.
No issues.
Awesome.
Loving
My
life.
neck is good though, man. This photography neck.
You just a little crack to the neck.
In the time and days we need the masseuse the most, we can't get one.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Just have them wear a mask.
Yeah.
You're good.
Yeah.
Socially distanced masseuse.
Two broomsticks with some gloves on the end.
That's right.
I think just about anything would work at this point. Yeah.
You just have a small child stand on your back or your neck. That's work for us.
Ooh, that's great.
Just find a small child.
It's the only reason to have a kid.
Right?
That and mowing the
My
lawn.
Oh, yeah.
And of course, joining us as always this week is our second co-host, Evelyn Hochstein, a freelance photojournalist.
She's first in my eyes.
As always, I was going to say most weeks. Occasionally one slips through the cracks like last week.
Yeah, no, you're very consistent,
Yeah.
Evelyn. We really appreciate that. But yeah, you're our Washington, D.C. based freelance photojournalist correspondent. So great to have you on. Everything going well for you?
Yeah, everything's good. Cool. In DC, it's raining. Like, I don't know. This hurricane is coming down. It's kind of nice, rainy day inside. Luckily, no protests to cover in the rain, so that's good.
I know, right? Yeah, we had quite a lot of rain here in South Korea. Actually, there was actually some landslides and whatnot. 13 people died because of the rain.
Oh.
So,
wow,
pretty horrible stuff. But let's talk about good news today. We're talking about new camera gear that came out over the course of the last week or so. Of course, the long-awaited Sony a7S III, or as I like to call it, the Sony a7 GH5, because it's basically a copy of the Panasonic GH5. And the Canon R5 was, of course, announced a few weeks ago and has now just been available for release and for purchase, if you can actually get your hands on the one or two that they actually pushed out to folks. I'm still waiting on mine, so I'm a little bitter about that, but again, awesome camera there. And of course, if you've got the big bucks and you want to spend money, you can get a 12K camera from Blackmagic, the Ursa Mini 12K, Ursa Mini Pro 12K. So another great camera. With all these new cameras coming out, I created an AtL commentary where I talked about, the basic question: are we in the golden age of visual journalism? Again, we have these massive and wonderful cameras that can do pretty much anything our creativity and our minds can think of. And I think that this means, basically we're in a golden age. We have now no limits in terms of what we can produce or create with the kind of equipment that's out there. But I'll throw it over to our co-hosts, and you tell me what you think. Do you think we're in the golden age, or is this just my wishful thinking? Throw it over to you, Travis.
Well, hey, how you doing there? Talking cameras, I love cameras. So, I think we have a wonderful. I mean, you look at. The whole span of like cameras and development up until this day, I think you have more being developed and technological breakthroughs in the last 10 years than you've had in the whole era of photography in itself. It's pretty incredible, all the stuff that's coming out, and I think that they're starting to push each other. Mirrorless has taken off, and the other guys, Nikon and Canon, have really said, you know what, we really need to get into this field, and they're producing cameras that are starting to rival and even push boundaries. There's when Canon's saying we're going to stop developing on the Mark 4 or 5 line, that's pretty amazing. That's a lot of people are going, what? They've been so used to that camera and wanted to use that camera and love that camera that it kind of scares them that Canon is going full in on the mirrorless, and it would be kind of crazy that they are. But even I kind of think that's crazy. But I mean, you look at the R5, which has 8K, and it obviously is going to be a really good focusing and stills camera, and we'll see how pushes it. I don't think it's going to be a practical workhorse in professional video, which is I think the A7S 3 will be really kind of a workhorse for video people, but we'll see. It's too early on those two to see how they work in the real world, but they both look great on paper, and I'm interested to see what people put out on them.
Yeah, no, I mean, the Sony A7S 3, if somebody asked me, hey, I need a video camera that can shoot 4K reliably for long lengths of time, I would absolutely point them towards the Sony A7S 3. I think it's a wonderful camera, and also its low light capability is unrivaled.
That's what's so incredible is if you see just footage of people going out to like the beach, like I had gone out with mine on out in California near the Santa Monica Pier, and where I couldn't see people in front of me, suddenly it looks like they're lit up on this A7S 3. It's like little magic gremlins. It's truly unbelievable. And what amazes me is it's usable ISO up into over 100,000 range. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's something you just can't find on any other camera. It's for some reason because of its larger pixel size, and it's a 12 megapixel camera, and people go, oh, 12 megapixels, which is more than enough for 4K video and stuff like that. But they're larger pixels, and the way they deal with light and low light and all that and absorb it onto the sensor is much better. So it's incredible what that camera can do in low light.
So you did actually get a chance to. I'm sorry, go ahead, Evelyn.
Oh no, keep going because mine's off topic.
Oh, okay. I was going to say, so you actually did get your hands on the camera, because we couldn't confirm that, but now we can confirm you did get to play with the camera.
We don't talk about that, Dave.
Okay. Excuse me. All right. I thought it was all good now, but all right.
I can talk about all the wonderful things in that camera.
Okay. All right. So you haven't.
Well, I was going to ask though, because I'm not the techie person, and I've only tried the A9. So, like, what's the difference between A7, the 7 series?
There's a huge difference. The A7 S is really geared towards video, and S used to stand for sensitivity, and it's a 12 megapixel camera. It's really built to shoot video and low light, and really kind of take advantage of that sensor, and built to do that. It is a video camera that shoots good stills. I mean, they're very solid stills. I took that to Guatemala and shot on the streets of Guatemala at night, just with no flashes and strobes, and was able to shoot amazing things with that camera in low light. Then they have the A7 series, which has no letter designation, and they're up to the 3 on that one. That is sort of like what you would find a 5D Mark IV or a 5D Mark III. It's it's a 20 some odd megapixel camera. It shoots amazing video. It has great autofocus and focus capabilities. It's a solid workhorse and an everyday kind of camera. And then you have the R line, which is the high resolution, and those are now the 3 was a 42 megapixel camera, and the 4 is a 61 megapixel camera. So when you're talking the A7R4, that's a 61 megapixel camera. So the resolution on that is really super high, and you can do a lot of things. And it's also it shoots 8 to 12 frames a second if you needed to, silent shutter. So I mean it's a fast camera as well, and being that high resolution is unbelievable.
Yeah.
Does the A9 have eye tracking?
So the A9 is the beast of the focusing. It will focus the fastest on animal eye tracking and human eye tracking. It shoots up to 20 frames per second. That's almost like video, 24 frames per second right there. It is the fastest and is the work beast in terms of the journalist type of camera. Sporting animal. It's an incredible camera, and that's their most expensive of those bodies.
Evelyn, you got the chance to play with the A9 for your photojournalism work. Did you use the autofocus?
I did, and I loved. I did the focus tracking too. There's this like focus tracking button on the lens, which is really cool that you can lock on. It makes it really easy because I didn't always find the buttons. Maybe just because I'm used to my Canon 5Ds that the back the back buttons were as easy to navigate, but the focus tracking button on the lens was amazing. And yeah, the eye tracking, it was really super. And great. I just made a bunch of prints with the stuff I shot on that camera. I love it. I mean, I still haven't switched, and I love my 5D Mark IVs, but when I heard they were going to discontinue them, that's pretty shocking. It was definitely like, okay, well, now's the time I've got to jump to mirrorless, which I've been debating, as you guys know. But then I keep hearing about the Canon overheating issues. So I'm like, do I want to?
But you're not shooting video. You're not shooting video, so you don't have to worry about that. You don't have to worry about that at all. And it's and that's a 4K 60 and 8K, and it's usually in around 20 minutes, mark or something like that. A little less on some marks, so you wouldn't have to worry about that at all.
And you wouldn't have to worry about it if you're shooting 4K 30 as well, or 4K 24. Those aren't affected by overheating, thankfully.
Yeah. So I really want to get my hands on it, and then the decision will be made. But I mean, I was about ready to jump to Sony. I really did love shooting with it, but just because I'm comfortable already with the Canon system, it may be easier. So we'll see.
And from what I've heard, the eye tracking in the Canon is supposedly very, very good, and people are touting it is really, really good. I know in the first iteration of the EOS R, when they came out with the eye tracking, people were like, not so good. And then they came out with an update on the EOS R, and it became much better. And I think the R5 is even better.
Yeah, and people who actually have used both cameras have said that the eye tracking is better on the R5. So, but then again, that's a year difference between two cameras. It's like comparing. Of course, it's going to be better. It's more advanced. I'm sure the next Sony is going to be better than the R5. So it's just this sort of, game of incremental improvements. And that's kind of like one of the things I talked about is that, we are going to see improvements out of these camera systems in the future. You can't not improve the camera systems. The board members, the shareholders demand it. So they have to come out with new things, and they will. And even now, these cameras aren't perfect, as we've talked about. Sony could definitely improve their IBIS. That's one of the criticisms I've heard of the Sony A7S III. Canon, of course, it overheats like there's nobody's business. So definitely we need to see improvements in the future, but I definitely see them as more incremental versus monumental. But what do you think are some future improvements? If you look in your crystal ball or what you kind of wish list, what do you want to see in the future of stills and video cameras? We'll throw it to you, Evelyn, first.
Okay. My crystal ball. My wants are simple. I want this autofocus perfection. Okay. Really, low light has improved so much. That has been such a game changer for me. So better quality in low light. I get low light. You still whether the camera does a good job or not, you need decent quality light to make a decent image. So if it's just all murky and dark, it doesn't always help. But the best low light capability, and definitely quick autofocus. Yeah, quick autofocus, and maybe better autofocus in low light. Those would be my wishes, and they're pretty much coming true. I mean, it's improved so much. So we're close to that.
Yeah, no, I haven't had the chance to use the A7S III, but everything I've seen, and of course I've been absorbing every single piece of content I can find online about these cameras, partially because I still haven't gotten mine, and I'm obsessed with having it. But I watch every single unboxing video. But yeah, I mean, that video by Philip Bloom, I don't know if you've seen that. That's a pretty remarkable example of what the camera can do, both in low light and with the slow motion.
That's the A7S one.
Right, the Now You Can See 2, or Part 2, where it shows off.
Maybe a little bit like too. They're still kind of heavy. And the thing about the Sony that I didn't love was the hand feel, even though the A9 II was way better than the A9 I. I like Canon's hand feel a little bit better. But okay, those are all my wishes. I hope you all.
So just better low light and better autofocus.
Yeah, they're very good now. But, you asked me for my, top dream list. I mean, we're close.
I think, if we could have a lot of what the A7S III is doing, but with higher resolution, and that would probably be the only thing that I would say I would want out of that camera, because again, I'm looking at the the R5, and it's still my camera of choice over the A7S III because I want that high resolution stills capability, in addition to the video capability, even though I know it's not as robust and reliable as the A7S III, but for my needs, it's good enough. But like I said, I would tell a wedding photographer, videographer, definitely don't get the R5 for wedding videography unless you're okay with 4K 30. And that's like, Gerald Undone. He did his very extensive testing of both cameras, and that's kind of thing you have to go into the mindset of. Don't think of this as like an.
Which one did he order?
He ordered 3 A7S IIIs for his studio.
Okay, thank you. Move on.
Right. I'm not. Again, I'm saying for his needs.
I'm teasing.
Okay.
I'm teasing. Yeah, I'm teasing you.
Yeah. Again, if video is your primary need, the A7S III is it.
Yeah.
And it's like, Evelyn, you talk about low resolution or low light capability. I mean, the A7S III is a magnificent low light camera, but do you want to sacrifice resolution for that? And I think.
No, I wanted high resolution, so that's why I went with the Sony, which is higher resolution.
It is, but they looked at Tony Northrup looked at both the 61 megapixel stills from the A7R4 and the R5, and there really wasn't much of a difference there. So, it's more megapixels.
No, not for the untrained eye. That's true.
Okay. I need to go to eye training. I'm
totally playing with you, Dave. I'm playing with you. It's the fun Sony Canon rivalry. I think they're both great cameras.
Yeah, I need to go get some eye training then. I like the hand feel of the Canon cameras, and I'm looking forward to getting that again.
It does feel really good in the hand. The ergonomics and the way it designed it is really a nice camera. For some reason, it just feels right, and that is true. And between and Evelyn is totally right. From the A9 to the A9 II, they did improve the hand grip and all that stuff. But there's something that the way they designed that Canon, that it feels it doesn't feel like a mirrorless anymore. It just feels like another camera, and they really did nice with the ergonomics on that.
Yeah. Have you gotten a chance to hold the R5 or?
I have.
Okay, cool. What did besides? Did you get a chance to shoot it? Did you play around with the menus? What were your? Because I haven't spoke to anyone who actually has touched the camera.
So, yeah, no, it's and it's same thing. The Sony A7S III has improved their menu system and has a touch menu now that Canon has implemented from the get-go on the EOS R. Their touch screen and screen implementation and use of the screen is bar none probably the best, and that goes back to the 5D Mark IV, which I think is the best intro to really that amazing touch screen that incorporates the menu and everything that you want to do on it, from zooming to touch focus. They nailed it, and it's fabulous. It works fantastic, and now finally Sony is doing the full adjustable pull-out screen and all of that, which is we've been yelling for years and years and years. But with that, there's a certain amount of, when you're shooting professional, that screen, if you're on the go and you pull it out to the side and you turn it and you're running around, it can break, and so there's times where you want to leave it in and you have to remember to put it back in, and it's just one more hinge that people like, this could break. But if you're on video, it's a necessity to have it. So, and also if you're getting old and you want that low shot and not lay on the ground, it's a necessity. Dave, you're going to love that.
Hey now.
It's the best thing ever.
Well, I was looking and talking to some people who were talking about the camera just for its photo capability. And they were saying even for them, the flip out, adjustable screen is really convenient for getting those low shots and the high shots. I use mine all the time on my GH5, which came out in 2017. For that all the time. So I've been living in the future.
It makes it so quick to go to different kind of angles to get stuff, and just by holding that tilt screen, you're just turning here and just going up and down and getting down to the ground, and not having to lay on the ground. It changes and speeds up your workflow. Like, I couldn't get that ground shot unless I laid on the ground with my 5D Mark IV.
Yeah.
I'd literally have to lay on the ground, look through the viewfinder, get as low as the camera to see what was going on. And with the EOS R, or the 5 or the A7S III, now that has the fully articulating screen, you can do anything. It's great.
That's right. Yeah, I know. I live that life. I had the 5D Mark II and every other regular camera before that. Even back in the day when you didn't have a screen on the back of your camera, when it was just using film. The good old days. But yeah, I'm excited to see in terms of like crystal ball type stuff. Again, improved IBIS, better low light, better focus. But I think the focus is magic. On like the videos I've seen of people who have shown the Canon R5, in action, like, oh my God, that's
Yeah,
I'm
I
most
still have
blown away by that. That and the photos,
Yeah,
I could care less almost about the video
yeah,
because again I'm going to keep the GH5 for video. It's going to be like my video camera, and this is going to be my stills camera.
right.
So back like the old
Yeah,
days when I had
yeah.
the 5D Mark II and was switching to Panasonic, I'm just going back to that.
Yeah, and people are, like the Canon, like the Sony, the IBIS is the a lot of the problems that people want improvement on is incorporating lenses that either have IBIS or don't have IBIS, and how they talk to each other, and how they function and all that. So people are still, they have little ways to go to perfect that and still push it to greater functionality.
Right, absolutely.
Hey.
So yeah, nothing happened there for the last 5 minutes, so that's great. Um, so again, any last comments about the golden age of visual journalism, or shall we move on to our next topic?
The golden age of cameras.
Well, cameras are used for visual journalism. And that's
Oh, dude,
we're not talking
we
about
went
the
so
golden
more
age of
beyond.
cameras. We're golden age of cameras, yes, but in terms of the way it helps out the visual journalism, that you can do anything pretty
I
much with
feel
your
I feel
cameras.
I feel like we didn't even discuss that.
Sure, we did.
Yeah. We focused on the technical, but I was going to add, I think we are, because just social media, accessibility to cameras, be it on your iPhone or an actual camera, how we consume visuals, we are just inundated. So I would say that access and the sort of broad, how much more for people who can like add to the visual literacy of, anything that's happening.
Hasn't that destroyed it at the same time?
Well, there is definitely there are a lot of cons on this pro con list.
Now we just opened up a whole new topic that could go on and on. Like this is a full episode in itself. This one,
right, and the dangers of manipulation, all of that. But I think the fact that we just are able to access so much more makes it, and see other people's points of view and perspective, or things that you can't always get to, and the cameras are so great. So even like the most basic amateur can still take a really high quality image. So
absolutely.
I think we are in a
You
golden.
just look what the iPhone video wise can shoot, which is spectacular, and broadcast quality in most states, and they are using it in most cases, especially now that COVID. You have all these reporters from home. They couldn't get good cameras that are on iPhones now, or different ways, and it's incredible what you can do now.
Right. Definitely.
Yeah, absolutely. From the very top, with the new cameras that just came out, to, of course, the very bottom with your cell phones. There's nothing you can't capture in any sort of way you want to do it. You want slow motion, you want 8K, you want low light, you want supreme autofocus. You got it all right now. It'll get better over time, but I can't think of major things that'll happen besides, again, things getting better that will make visual journalism more accessible and capable for all of us.
Definitely.
All right.
I agree.
Cool. Well, let's go ahead and move on to our next topic then. We're talking about the World Press Photo Organization. So they recently published a photo of their team, and some folks, Nana Kofi, I'm going to try her pronounce her last name, basically said, World Press Photo so white, so to speak, because their entire board is white. And so then they made the comment about, this is institutional racism, right? You've got an entire board of people who are all the same race who are making these decisions, not to, of course, mention the fact that, I think the World Press Photo Organization is in like the Netherlands or Sweden or something like that, which is more predominantly white. But again, there's diversity amongst all populations, right? So should the board represent diversity amongst the world? If you're going to call yourself the World Press Photo Organization, shouldn't your organization, or the folks who make decisions in your board, your supervisory board, reflect the diversity of the world? What are you guys' thoughts? Do you think that the photo board is at a disadvantage because it doesn't have anyone of color on their team? Or do you think perhaps there is maybe a bit too much looking into this, and that we should just focus on the skills and capabilities of the people who are on the board, and we shouldn't try to necessarily pick like, okay, we need a person of this color, a person of this color, a person of this ethnicity, et cetera, et cetera. Like, you got to have the diversity bingo, so to speak. What are your thoughts on this?
I think it's very important that the three white people here discuss this.
I know we're going to get called out.
Obviously, they need diversity,
including ourselves. We do too. But I mean, it's not like what you're saying. Like, you just automatically go and you pick somebody. But it's what's happening now is we're realizing stupidly, I hate to even use the word realizing, but we're taking a look at all of these institutions, and we're like, it's a wake-up call, like, hello, and it's right there in your face, like, no, we haven't been diverse enough, or we haven't. It is the World Press Photo. That's a really good point. I mean, it is taking, entries from all over the world, but we do need to look inwardly, and it's a good lesson. And I don't think the answer is just saying, okay, let's hire somebody, just hire a more diverse staff, but it's like something that we need to institutionally change. And I think that's the point of everything, the exercise that's going on right now, that this is systemic in every nation. And look, it is in Amsterdam, the World Press Photo. It's a different racial makeup than other countries like the United States. But, there are non-white people in the Netherlands, obviously. And I'm sure there's some non-white photographers as well. And yes, I think the World Press Photo probably should be, more diverse, because it's representing photojournalism, and photojournalism is inherently a diverse topic. Look at the majority of winners. They're from I'm guessing, I can't say this with fact, but if you look at like the wars and atrocity, really like hardcore photojournalism, it probably comes from places where the majority of the subjects are not white, often, historically. So we should, be aware, pay attention to that. That's my take on that.
So my opinion on this, as being someone that actually is a chairman on a photo community board of American photographic artists, we're dealing with this exact kind of issue. And Evelyn, it brings up very good points. You can't instantly say, all right, let's look at our board, but you have to. You can't say, all right, let's put someone in different positions of color. It's like you can start to make steps to do the right thing and change your board to morph into that. But there's a lot of people there that are and you can't look away from the fact that whether they're white or not, they're trying their hardest to serve the community and do the right thing, especially on my board. So steps we take are to start an advisory committee immediately on diversity and incorporation and inclusion, so that anything we do, we can use them and make the right steps and get the right viewpoints. So I think you can immediately kind of take the right steps to do the right thing and get the right feedback from that group that you're trying to do. And unfortunately, it's like I'm going to have as a white male, have a different viewpoint than someone that's a black female or anything like that. So you need to get those different opinions, because we're just not going to see through someone's eyes the same way. So you need that kind of feedback from them to know what to do and what the right thing to do, and what sometimes you just don't even know what they're looking for, how they feel, or the culture, or small subtle things that are important to them or to us, and how that changes the dynamic. So I just think it's so crucially important to at this stage is to really start having those conversations and taking the steps. It's not going to be an overnight thing. It's going to take a long time, but we can lead today and try and do the right thing.
You said you are putting together an advisory committee. Can you talk a little bit about that sort of process?
Sure. There's certain people in the community, and for me, it's very important, to understand where, if I look at my say in New York City, I look at my membership and I see, well, it's actually a lot of older white men or older, or younger female, whatever it be, and go, well, why don't I have this part of the community or that part of the community? Why am I not reaching, transgender, or why I'm not reaching any kind of, maybe I don't have enough Asians, or I'm not representing them properly. How do I find someone that has an important voice in that community, bring them on to me to say, hey, listen, voice. I think your voice needs to be represented. Would you come in with us and help guide us and be an advisor to how do we kind of outreach and do the right things and make it so that your community feels welcome and wants to be a part of our community, because we all want the same thing. We all want to, to represent and benefit and be a provider for, photographers to benefit, to learn, to be more successful in everything they do. So I think the more people that you bring under that umbrella and kind of get their voices, it's very important.
So I'm curious, are you selecting the people for the committee or the advisory board, or is it sort of a call to action?
It's both. It's absolutely both. We've certainly, as a board, you first have that first discussion, like, do you know anyone? Do you know, like, and then talk to them. The more people you can find and I direct it, so if I know that one person is fabulous in maybe hair and makeup and photography, they might have 15 people that you wouldn't have even thought of, because I'm slightly different than what you do, but I deal with your people every day. So it's just letting those rings kind of help you find outside of your own normal little enclave.
Evelyn, has there been any sort of, I know we've talked about this, I think actually this exact thing we've already mentioned for WPAL, but I think WPAL might want to consider diversifying into men. There's no, I'm just kidding. Anyways, but I'm all for diversity, and I think it's important and essential actually to successful organization. I mean, there is strength in diversity, absolutely. But is there something you've said, like you said, for diversity's sake, right? It's just basically you're choosing, getting everyone. Is it almost to the point where it's arbitrary? You're trying, like, for instance, there was a great satirical video I saw about the IT community, in Silicon Valley, where it's like you have a room full of people and like, I need, every single different race, but they all have to agree with the boss. It's like that kind of thing where it's like, you can be of all the different, diversity, but you have to think the same way. And I just, I want to make sure that we're being diverse for the right reasons, as opposed to just being diverse because we have to be diverse. I think this show should be diverse, and I'd like to set up an advisory committee right now with the show hosts who are here. So obviously you are a representational community of the people who host this show. So we'll have the advisory committee meeting right after the show.
That's the first step.
No, I mean,
you always have to take the first step.
It's absolutely a concern I've had for this show, and that's why I've tried to diversify, this year and have a lot more women voices and opinions on the show. And probably in the next year, I will be pushing more towards getting a diversity of race on the show. So look for that, in the next coming year after we hit episode 250 and beyond. There could be a shakeup with regard to, the kind of faces and voices you see and hear on this show on a regular basis.
That's him subtly saying he's getting rid of us.
Not getting rid of you guys. No. But, again, that's when I can, I've talked to you guys about this. I've sent you, I've gotten your opinion or sought your opinion on the topic. But, and we can talk about this a little bit in the future of the show later on. But, again, my thinking is, do we have a show that has new guests or new co-hosts, new panelists each week, or do we change out the panelists completely, the co-hosts lineup completely with different co-hosts? Again, as we go into the 5th year of the show, right? I'm thinking about, again, what you've said and what's been said many, many times on this show is that we're all white for the most part. The majority of the people who are on the show are white, right? So what is my responsibility as a show host to ensure I'm having inclusive voices and different voices on the show? And that might include changing out the host lineup as we go into the 5th year. Do you guys have any thoughts on that? Do you think that's the right move or the wrong move? I mean, what do you think? What do your take?
I think that you have the ability to do whatever you want to do. You're a voice. You want to do that. If you want to include diversity, your guests can be diverse.
Okay, and our last story this evening or morning, or whenever you're listening to this, we're talking to Evelyn Hochstein about a story wherein a Seattle judge ordered media to share unpublished protest photos with police. Essentially, this was a protest from May 30th, where the police wanted evidence, essentially unpublished video and photos from different news media organizations within the Seattle area. And, we're talking about, of course, organizations that are established news, stations and whatnot. They list here KIRO 7, King 5, etc. So not necessarily like rando freelance photojournalist or whatnot. And they're not looking for content from their cell phones. Let's say that's off limits, but the content they shot with their professional cameras. So we've seen stuff like this in the past, but I don't think I've ever seen as sort of a blatant call for imagery from the media. And we'll talk about the update of this story in a minute. But just from the outset of this initial story, what are your thoughts on this, Evelyn? If you were or put in a position like this, how would you react?
Oh, my immediate thoughts are that it's just completely wrong to try to get this kind of information from journalists. There has to be a protection. This may not fall into the sort of traditional, source protection or privilege that we are maybe more familiar with, and this is maybe to some outsiders seems a little bit more, straightforward perhaps. But I think once you get into a habit of requesting this kind of information from journalists, it's extremely dangerous. It is not our job to provide evidence to the police in any way, shape, or form. They have their own methods of surveillance, recording, and I just think this is an extremely dangerous, slippery slope, and absolutely should not even be considered.
Right. No, absolutely. And I think that there's definitely some misunderstandings of the role of media, even in an instance where there's crime taking place. Now, in the story they mentioned, there's some laws, like shield laws, that exist in Washington State to protect journalists. Is there anything like that in D.C.? Or Virginia or Maryland?
Specifically of that, I generally thought that these were across the board, that there were laws to protect journalists from these kinds of subpoenas. And I do understand that these subpoenas happen quite frequently, but generally the newspaper just declines, or a news outlet declines, and whether it goes further than that, I'm not sure, but I don't know specifically about DC and Virginia.
Right, and you've not ever been in a situation like that, or know of a situation like, for instance, within some of the publications you've worked for, right? You've never heard of that?
I specifically have not been called upon, but it would not be I would not be surprised if there haven't been requests, because in Washington, for example, the people that tried to take down the Andrew Jackson statue, their photos that were published were used by the FBI and placed on wanted signs from actual journalists' images that were published. So, I would not be surprised if the Washington Post or the AP or whoever had been confronted. Did this information, did it happen or trickle down to me? No, not that I know of, but it would not surprise me in the least, because I saw the FBI wanted images.
Wow. I mean, yeah, once it's in the public stream, I guess they can do whatever they want with it.
It also endangers, those are the cases when it does endanger journalists, and it does endanger journalists, excuse me. And I find it hard to believe that in that whole public scene of people trying to take down a statue, that the police did not have their own images that they could use. I mean, I think it's really antagonistic to try to use images directly from the newspaper. I would find it hard to believe there weren't other images.
Yeah, no, and I think, you bring up an important point about it crossing the line with regard to our role there covering the story. We don't work for the police. It's the same reason why, the show Live PD didn't publish or didn't, publish or give the video of the person who was killed during the police stop. That's their reasoning was, they don't work for the police. They would provide that content if subpoenaed, but they they weren't going to keep it on file forever for them. So again, it does create this blurring of the line, because once Seattle and all these news organizations give up the footage, even if they're forced to, the protesters on the ground or anyone who's being covered is automatically going to think, okay, well, you're just in another arm of the police force.
Right, and I think there's perhaps a case that can be made, like somehow you did photograph a murder or something that wasn't a public event. Maybe, not that I even want to go down that road, but these are like public protests and events that are occurring, and it would ultimately, like you just said, endanger journalists. It would like pit journalists against the public and change the role that we play as journalists if we're out there reporting what's happening. So we may report or show an image or even write about something that people don't want exposed, or maybe it was even a crime. But that is the only extent, that I believe our work can be used, because if we, it's like we're an independent party. We just cannot, the police cannot turn to us to do their job. It would make journalism impossible and dangerous. And just wrong. I mean, there just has to be a separation there.
Yeah, no, I was thinking, it really has to boil down to the individual photojournalist or documenter, right? Because if you capture something that is like a heinous crime, right, are you going to be an impartial observer, or are you going to take a proactive stance, especially if what you've captured could potentially lead someone's arrest, if perhaps they, you witnessed a murder, right? Or something like that. You had that on camera. And, again, we've kind of we've brushed on this a little bit. And I think, again, it has to be, the circumstances have to be, around what you've captured and your own individual decision to support. And, that's, going to be different for a person as opposed to being forced in this instance to provide your content. Now, there was an update to this story. The judge had a hearing on it, and his ruling was that he would act as a sort of intermediary, a go-between between the police and the media. He would review the footage and only provide footage that was relevant to the police's subpoena. Do you think that sort of changes the situation anyway, or make it any less sort of egregious with regard to the journalist's rights?
I think it makes it slightly less egregious in the sense that I believe the judge recognized the danger and saw that there is potential for misuse of the imagery, the outtakes, and also maybe setting a precedent for this sort of thing. Right. So I think I don't know if it's a male or female, but the judge probably acted in a way that they thought would be fair, and that they would be the only person, and they would limit the scope of what was used. So I think probably the intention, I don't think it's as egregious, but I think just in general, this is something that needs to be avoided at all costs. So I think while I disagree with, the judge's idea, I think at least the judge was acting in the sense of like recognizing, what a slippery slope this is, and the potential for misuse in the future, just blurring the lines between the role of journalists and creating some weird, liaison between the law enforcement and journalism, which, is not safe for anybody, and that's just not our job. So yeah, I mean, I don't agree, but I think, it was a compromise.
Right. And from what I've read in the follow-up story, the news organizations are going to continue to fight this and appeal this. I believe they have 21 days to appeal the case. So we're going to follow up with this story after that point and see what the final decision is going to be in this case. But I think that while I agree with you, the judge is trying to make a sort of everybody happy in this instance, it does kind of present a slippery slope, right? Because it's like, okay, in this instance, the judge is okay. Well, what if the police aren't happy with what the judge gives them? Are they going to continue to push for more and more access? And I think, they might get to a point where, this comes up again, and the next judge is like, I don't care. Give your raw B-roll to the police. I don't care. So it's like we're leaving this up to the discretion of each individual judge, and some judges might not be as considerate to the sensitivities of this case.
I feel like whether you capture something or not, like journalists are asking for this footage should be off limits. Like this shouldn't even come up, right? So we're in a situation, and I wonder if if it's becoming more flagrant, the asks perhaps because of the political climate that we're in, and the really abrasive relationship that we're now facing in the United States between the media and law enforcement, and just how the media is portrayed these days as an enemy of the people and things like this. And I think just the fact, like, I would be curious in other protest situations in the past if the media were asked for their outtakes to find vandals and looters. Like, did this happen 10 years ago? I mean, I'm sure we can find protests, riots, whatever, and find a similar example. But, in the current political climate, I'm wondering how much that's a force, because, you're seeing journalists get shot with these projectiles all the time and injured and hit in the eye, and protesters as well. And it's just a really hostile environment and relationship between law enforcement and the media.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, that is a good question, and I should perhaps pose that to a point of contact within the NPPA, because of course they're the ones who you always see commenting on these type of stories, saying like, hey, this is a egregious, flagrant abuse of journalistic rights. And I was thinking about that. You mentioned obviously there's people on the media side and whatnot, the victims, so to speak, of police brutality and other sort of instances like that, where they are using their, like, if I'm attacked, right, I'm going to use, I have it on camera that you're attacking me. You're damn well sure believe I'm going to use my footage to defend, and show that sort of interaction,
sure.
Right? But then again, that's still my choice. No one's ordering me to use my own content in my own defense, or
Right.
like for instance, I mean, shoe on the other foot, Evelyn. You capture a protester getting, beaten up by the police or whatever. Do you feel a sort of service to that protester or that person, in the case if they're fighting the police or something, or going for a wrongful injury suit, and they said, hey, can you please give me some of your unpublished photos so I can use that as evidence in my case? What would you do in that instance?
Well, that's a really good question. Well, that's different. Let me think of the best way to explain. I mean, the police are asking to go through footage looking for potential evidence of a crime that was committed not by them but in public, like using your imagery as an investigative.
Well, it's not even an ask, it's
right?
An order. That's a subpoena, right?
An order. If I have an image of not just somebody getting arrested, but let's say somebody like George Floyd was filmed being killed with his police officer, Derek Chauvin, with his knee on his neck for 8 minutes and ultimately led to his death. Okay. Right. Like, yes, you should use that imagery to, and that was a cell phone video. But, if I had an image of someone doing something wrong to another human being where they were being hurt, whatever, and it was completely wrong, it would be hard to make the case that, I shouldn't use my imagery. Now, the person, and maybe it's like a little late in the day and I'm just thinking this all out, but it is different than the setup of like the police trying to get images to, first of all, this is like a car, it's not a murder, but I don't even want to like draw those distinctions, because I just think it should be off limits. Like, it is not our job to do the police's work, and which would then therefore endanger us. The police are also public servants. So if I did have an image of a police officer doing something, wrong, illegal, hurting another human being that just goes completely, they should be punished for, or should be investigated, let's say. I think
there's a power dynamic there too. I mean, you're talking about a person of authority versus a person who's, right, just a regular citizen.
Right. I mean, I would find it hard in that capacity to just say, no, I'm not going to use this. I have this evidence, because in what case wouldn't I want to do that? The difference between the police wanting to get these images is like it's a different set of parameters. It's like, it's not really the same. I mean, I can see you're making a good point, and I want to articulate it clearly, but I have to sort of think about how to explain that clearly. But I think you get what I'm saying. Like, the parameters are different. It's like, okay, there's been this, public rioting, looting, and there should be public camera. I don't know why they don't have their own images of this, but it's not our role to do the policing in that job and give them evidence to make their job easier to go and arrest whatever, crimes they think were being committed.
Right. No, I think it's not a black and white issue. It's not exactly clear. In certain instances, there's definitely some shades of gray with regard to decisions when you're out there and what you do with your imagery and who you support, who you protect, who you provide assistance to. And again, I think regardless of anything, it should be up to the individual person what they want to do with their own imagery. If they
and it's also go ahead.
No,
I didn't interrupt you. I was
again, in my opinion, I think again it should just be something like whether you witness a crime against one person against another, whether that's person, protester attacking and hurting a police officer or a police officer hurting a protester or any situation where two people are, engaging with one another and there is a disparity there or one person is hurting another and you capture that, it has to be up to you as the person individually. Do you want to go forward and use your evidence? And I think that should be up to the individual person versus a subpoena ordered situation. Because once the subpoena order becomes something, it takes that control out of you. But again, the outsiders don't see that. The outsiders don't care. They just see, you with a camera. And that's why we're getting to this instance where you see it all the time. And I see it on these Facebook forums, especially in New York during the City Hall protests, like constant attacks of photo journalists just trying to do their job by protesters who were just saying like, nope, you can't shoot here, you can't shoot here. Like, guys, you have your First Amendment right to protest. I have my First Amendment right to capture you protesting. Okay, we need to be on the same.
To that point that you're making, though, is it really up to the individual? Because I look at the press as like a First Amendment type right, like we are an institution, right. The Fourth Estate, and this is an issue of like the state compelling us to help them versus the citizen, maybe make a claim against the state or those in power, back to that power imbalance that you're talking about. So different rules here. And, it doesn't mean that, you're right. It's not black and white. There could be a case where it's not about right or wrong or police being good versus bad or citizens being good versus bad, where yes, there may be a time, but that you do want to share some evidence. But in the principle here is protecting journalists' freedom, access, their ability, and the greater good that their coverage, provides, which is a check on power ultimately. So if the power then can access your images. So I think that's why we have to look at it broadly and just kind of all of these things become off limits, right? Like a shield.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, that can definitely be a way to look at it. Absolutely. I mean, sort of a blanket response, or at least a blanket way to look at it, to say like, hey, I have to protect the integrity of not only, my right to perform and do my job as a photojournalist, but all photojournalists, right? Because it's not just you, because your actions can affect others and can present a negative sort of just general perception of photojournalists who are trying to do the job. You can say it's like, okay, it's not an isolated incident with me and what I'm doing. It's going to permeate throughout the rest of the industry.
Right. Yes.
All right. Well, we'll follow up this story and see how it changes over time. I'm definitely eager to see what the final outcome will be and what it is. And I'm now going to do some research and talk to some people and find out what, how is this issue affecting the larger visual journalism community? Because I'm sure there are probably instances of this going on right now that we don't even know about. It's not making the news, and it's perhaps maybe smaller news organizations or news organizations that might be more prone to support one side or another.
Absolutely. You're breaking.
Well, again, just we'll look at the larger picture for this, for sure. Absolutely. All right, well, I think that's going to end this week's show. Sort of a little bit more technical difficulties than normal, but glad to have you on, Evelyn, to talk about this very important issue and get your thoughts on it. All right, is there anything else that you'd like to add or throw out there before we sign off?
No, just glad to be here. I'll see you. This is definitely, I think, really all of these topics are just so pertinent. So I think each week it's like nice to sort of touch on them because these protests are continuing and we're facing every day the climate's changing. So I think it's exciting and it's important to kind of keep it in the discussion going. So yeah, looking forward to next week.
Awesome. All right. Yeah. There'll be more stories next week for sure on the same topic. Protests are not going away anytime soon.
Nope.
All right. Well, I think that's going to end for this week's show. Thank you all for listening or watching Around the Lens, episode 236. If you'd like to continue the conversation, please go to aroundthelens.com and find links to all of our social media and our Patreon if you'd like to help donate the show and promote and support what we're doing here. And make sure to check out my commentary on Are We in the Golden Age of Visual Journalism? Let me know. Leave your comments on that YouTube channel episode, and really want to kind of get your thoughts on it. So let's continue the conversation online. All right, for Evan Hochstein, I'm David J. Murphy. This has been episode 236 of Around the Lens, and we are out.
Thanks for listening to Around the Lens. We hope you enjoyed the show.
All right, Evelyn.
To continue the conversation, head on over to one of our social media outlets, such as Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, or Twitter. To support the show financially, consider donating to us via Patreon.
I think it's 'cause I'm
for show notes from this week's episode and links to everything else we talked about, just go to our website, aroundthelens.com. Finally, if you or someone you know might be a good guest for the show, get in touch with us via email at info@aroundthelens.com.
Reschedule or cancel some of the upcoming episodes because of I'm going to be doing